I'm super excited to be here at the conference floor of Facilitate Advanced Therapies Week 2025 in Dallas, Texas. I'm Lee Buckler, co-founder and host of Advanced Therapies Think Tank, or as we like to call it, AT3, online at advancedtherapiesthinktank.com or at3.chat. And I'm super excited for this to be our inaugural session. It'll be a little bit of a teaser of what we plan to do in the year and years ahead. Hopefully we'll give you a little bit more of an insight of what that will look like after our first exciting panel, which is our inaugural launch, which I'm super pleased to have a panel here of people. I'll let them introduce themselves. But the subject is, what is the influence, what will be the influence, what can be the influence, what should be the influence of technology on biotechnology, specifically, of course, as the topic, advanced therapies. And I have three people with three very distinct perspectives and a lot of opinions and certainly a lot of expertise on that subject. Claudia, can you introduce yourself, please?
Hi, everyone. I'm Claudia Zilberberg. I am actually a co-founder of Cost and Digital, a digital technology providing AI services for the industry at the moment.
Very happy to have you. Edwin.
Well, thank you very much for having us on. Edwin Stone, I'm CEO of Cellular Origins. We're a robotic automation platform that is focused on enabling scale in the industry of cell therapy.
Raphael.
Yes. My name is Raphael Ognar. I'm a CEO and co-founder of Nkill Therapeutics. We are a cell therapy developer, bringing a novel approach to try to accelerate the path to a true off-the-shelf cell therapy to be able to treat more patients, specifically in the cancer field.
Excellent. Welcome all. Thank you for joining the think tank and for carving out your time at this busy conference. This is just an online conversation. This will be an example of exactly what we're intending to do with the think tank. And we're just going to kick off with, I think, the first question, which is a big picture, and we'll drill down into the topic. But I think the big question is, we see occasional examples of fast-paced disruptive innovation, even in our field. I mean, I think of Terry at Alpita Therapeutics, went from discovery to commercial in 3 years. We're constantly looking for ways to move faster, bring these therapies to patients. And then we have tech giants like Mark Cuban and Amazon and Oracle and others talking about how they're going to completely disrupt pharmaceutical industry, the healthcare industry, the way we bring drugs, price drugs, deliver drugs. Does any of that, do you think, really possible for technology to break the mold of a heavily regulated industry that's regulated for a purpose to keep patients safe and at the same time treat them in ways that we haven't been able to do before?
Well, I think that definitely technology can play a big role in the discovery. I know that we have large amount of data that we can manage, and if we can manage properly with the tools that now we have access to, like AI and so forth, we will be able to do fast discovery drugs and be able to bring them to the manufacturing floor. And there are other areas where the technology belief can fast track drugs. The regulatory agencies will have to pick up speed in terms of technology and definitely be able to access to that data that they have access today and perhaps share with all of us and be able to see how can we improve those products, create more efficient products and cost effective for more access. So I think the technology has specific spots to work with, not necessarily the whole stream, because this industry is small scale in some ways. We started in autologous field. So the amount of opportunities are usually in a small number of patients, but the before and after, the post-infusion data could be an interesting piece as well. So there are pockets where the technology can help us to streamline and accelerate.
So you're bringing the software and digital side, to this equation, Edwin. You're roboticizing mechanical robots and widgets and manual processes. I mean, that's another flavor of technology here. Of course, you can't innovate paper forms. you can roboticize manual procedures, but what's your take on the interplay between not only your kind of robotic automation sort of technology, but how the technology sector in general will influence the pace at which we can scale, or the pace at which we can lower cost, and of course the pace at which we can bring these more of these therapies to more patients?
I mean, fundamentally for us, actually, the drive and frankly the capital that goes into the technology sector, with the best will in the world, will always massively exceed what is going specifically into cell therapy, but even healthcare more generally is a big opportunity that I think we often fail to use. I think often we do see ourselves as a bit siloed, and I think it's really important. I think there is no stronger time to see how many hundreds of millions, billions, hundreds of billions of dollars are going in elsewhere. I think what's important is we work out how we can access that. For us, within robotics, we're really fortunate. If we were trying to do what we were doing today, 10, 15 years ago, it'd be impossible. Robotics was clunky, it was complicated to program, it was relatively inefficient. It's moved leaps and bounds, and it's done that because of a lot of capital that's been employed, not specifically for our sector. And for me, one of the really exciting things is that's accelerating. We've got the opportunity to benefit from all of that capital going in. I think absolutely agree is that what we need to recognize is the similarities and differences in this field though. So on the one hand, we can leverage that, we can use those opportunities, we can think about where there's opportunities to iterate quickly, but that's not our sole industry. The Silicon Valley in particular is used to kind of placing bets where they can get a relatively early return, that they can bring that risk out step by step as the company develops. That's not our industry. We often have to play, particularly in a therapeutic, quite a long game, and it's a 1 or 0 at phase 3, or potentially even beyond, whether or not that is a success or not. And so I think when we're looking at how we take lessons, how we bring in the things that are being funded and backed within the tech industry by Silicon Valley, we do need to differentiate those things that have a relevance to our space, but also remember we do have differences.
Right. And Raphael, I mean, because your big task is to disrupt or revolutionize or innovate around biology, and there's only so much risk you can take on, right, as a therapeutic developer, and that your investors will support.
Yeah.
And how do you think about this interplay?
Well, so first, it's really to continue on the theme that was here, is that I don't believe in a takeover from the big techs. I think it's and I hope it's not going to happen actually, because I don't think we are adaptable to the big tech model. That being said, I really agree that there are going to be sweet spots where they can significantly improve what we're doing, like make us really better at some aspects of our development. And like you said, we are more a long-term gig. Our life cycle of our products is extremely long, and the non-revenue generating part of this is actually even longer. So this cannot be applicable to the tech model where it's quick pace, rapid revenue, quick burn, and then out. Someone else takes the next sweet spot.
Right.
So that's the first situation. The second piece that I believe is that we are disruptors by nature, but we are in a very conservative environment when you think about it, because it's about patients.
Right.
At the end of the day, we never have to forget that we are dealing with human beings at the end. There is no halfway through. There is no, oh, my therapy is good, but it's just reaching 50% of what it should, so we are fine with that. No, we are thriving and trying to reach the best outcome for our patients. And if we fail, failure can mean we're killing patients, or we are letting them die. So this is serious things. And a product can die, a patient shouldn't, because of what we do. And I will always bring that back. It's a little kind of morbid, but that's the reality of what we're dealing with.
To that point, though, do you think, I mean, one of the things about the tech model we talked about earlier is failing fast and innovating quickly. Do you think there's a way, and the challenge with our sector is sometimes we often don't fail till phase 3, because, you can pretty quickly establish safety and you get some indications of efficacy. Is there a way for us to fail faster?
So what I tend to see is that I absolutely could not agree more that we have to be so protective of the patient, so protective of patient safety, and that's also being custodians of the industry. Yeah. We've seen time and time again where someone's gone down a dangerous path, potentially even gone slightly rogue, and we've seen a patient die, and that's been a huge setback actually for therapies that were on a really positive trajectory, and we need to be really careful about both the individual patients but also the patient population and the industry population. I think one of the challenges that tends to build is you get industry mindsets that come through, and something I think we see and we've had to challenge along the way is that there are areas of the industry that are conservative and are cautious because they've got that very strong, quite rightly so, risk attitude built into them. And I think that's where, again, we need to think about how we separate some of that out in the industry. If we can get parts of the industry where we can be iterating quickly, where we've got a sandbox, where we can act safely. I think particularly from a technology point of view, where we're doing tech development in the industry, that's great. I think where the rubber's hitting the road, where we're actually getting towards patients, we've got to take a different mindset. And that's always really hard. I mean, classic example actually you see in all companies is the difference between the R&D and the manufacturing. Moving from that step is always a painful experience because it's got completely different cultures. And so we're going to have to figure out how to get those two groups to coexist if we're going to take some of those opportunities of running fail fast, moving really quickly in parts, but at the same time maintain their obligation to patients.
I think that the amount of data in the biology side that we are accumulating in the manufacturing and the discovery and creating with technology a network of all the data in different dimensions will help us to make perhaps a better decision and in terms of the product outcomes. And I think that that is what is needed right now. I understand that we are risk averse because patients are at the end of the line, but we have so many pieces of information that if we can put together and technology help us to see the correlation between all of the data that we have, we may be able to make decisions that are more accurate.
Yeah, and actually, so everything that is said is really like right on spot with what I think we should be going. Aligning incentives is critical. What I find interesting with biotech, when you build a biotech, you build three companies. You build a discovery company, then a clinical development company, and then a commercial company. There got to be better ways of doing this because every time it's a different model, different incentives, and pretty big capital to reach the three. So partnership is one way to kind of cut down and advance faster. I'm a big believer of partnership, but that requires to be in a more sharing mode, which we're going to probably come back to in a moment. The other aspect is like, can we leapfrog and accelerate in some ways? Of course they are. The life cycle and the steps are really tedious and long, but we were talking about AI, how it could impact, and how everybody's talking about it. And today, AI, in my view, is essentially a way of better analyzing data and big data to be able to really find the right way of making a good decision, having the right insights. I'm sure we can do better. We're going to go and reduce the risk, go faster and reduce the risk the day we're going to be able to create synthetic clinical trials, for example. The day you're going to create a fake patient, for lack of better terms, and test your drug towards that patient and see what could eventually happen. It's not going to replace a real clinical trial, but it should be able to give you a nice incentive.
And a greater probability of
you can
success.
tune from it.
And say like, hey, we see too much of this when we do that. That I believe technology can help. Is it tomorrow? Maybe not. Maybe it's going to be a few years down the road. But we need to think that way, because if I can, we saw in cell therapy, it's the same across all developments, but I think cell therapy is even more acute. We did fantastic preclinical packages to FDA, EMEA, showing how great our drug is going to be in saving mice from cancer. And so many failed still in human beings.
Yeah.
There got to be something in between. And I believe in the use of technology to create human models, patient models that are going to be imperfect, but I think a imperfect synthetic human model.
Well, if they lead to failing faster, and if they lead to higher probability of
success, it will be
success,
better than any mice or any mouse or any.
And
any
the regulatory agencies should be able to align with that type of model, so they can see ahead of time how things are moving along.
Yeah, and there have been huge strides towards that. I mean, people have been working obviously on organoids, particularly to try and mitigate the toxicity effects of drugs, not necessarily even the efficacy effects of drugs, because remember, a lot of the failures that we see late stage are not necessarily still about the effectiveness. It's about things that didn't necessarily translate from the earlier studies around the safety profile. But we've got this interesting time of how much now do we press forwards on those physical models versus how quickly the computational models and how much we can drive that through data? Is actually that now a time that we shouldn't be further progressing that and pushing hard into just doing this purely digitally and with digital twins?
So there's always this push and pull, right, in technology innovations. There has to be, the technology has to be pushing us into a direction and has to enable a revolution, but then there has to be the pull already, right? So we've got the pull, we've got a massive need to innovate faster, patients that need treatments. I think the technology is coming there, but I want to touch, and we've touched on two things now, which I think is the direction we want to take the rest of the conversation. One is the big data. You can't do anything AI, and we have to touch on AI on this subject, of course.
Of course.
But you can't do anything, AI is nothing without the data. And there are examples, and any one company can apply to their small data sets. But to your point, I don't think we're not going to break anything if every company is just analyzing their own little data sets. The only way we're going to really have breakthroughs is to somehow aggregate data sets and build pre-competitive collaborations, in my view. And there are examples of this in life sciences. There's Nimble, there's the UK Biobank Initiative, there are other initiatives, and there's certainly examples of it outside of biopharma, where the telecom industry, for example, the big companies get together and say, we want to bring 5G to the market, but no one company can do it, so they invest in 5G and then each develop their own proprietary products. This happens in tech, microchip technologies, this happens in tech all the time. And it seems to me, and maybe there's some barriers, some unique barriers that we have to realize and plan around, but it seems everybody says, the big pharma will never give, why would they give their data? Why would big telecom give their data? Why would anybody give their data? Because they know that they will succeed more if everybody can get to the next level of technology. And is the barrier? Are the barriers just too high for us to do that here, or is that an aspirational thing we should work towards with the White House, with the EU, with ARM, think big? Is there a mechanism by which we could build a big pre-competitive federated data infrastructure to mine, to explore to explore?
I think that there are actually, FDA, from my point of view, is the house holding of all the data from everything that we do at the moment. And I think that bodies like ARM, or like a standard coordinating body that also is a nonprofit organization, could perhaps be one of them.
CIBMTR has a bunch of data, right?
Yeah, I think that someone has to take that task, but from a very high level, and be able to be the sharing point for many people in the industry. Otherwise, we are not moving forward, and not moving forward creates non-accessibility, not affordability. So at the end of the day, we need to bear in mind that if the regulatory agency doesn't understand that their position is very powerful, not only in regulated, but also in the holding of the data that we have today, it's something that we need to start to think about together as an industry. Yeah.
Raphael, you raised that the IP maybe is unique in the biopharma world as opposed to these other sectors, but surely there's a way to protect IP and still mine data in an anonymized, protectable format, no?
Yeah, so that's I'm no IP expert, so I will not go on a field that I cannot understand enough, but for sure, back to the tech versus biotech, for example, there are many successful tech companies that didn't have any solid IP behind it, and it didn't matter because there were other barriers to the entry for competitors to copy them that were just structurally by design there. What I will see on our side, of course, we need to figure out this IP thing in a maybe better way and more flexible way. I don't know if it's really doable, but we need to change mindset. The problem we have is that today we have people developing drugs, and the only day we see exactly what they have done until they got approval is after the approval, and there comes the publication. And we might be developing something that, having seen the data earlier, would have helped us accelerating, but then we can become a competitor that they don't want to see coming. So
also failure data. We should be publishing failure data.
We are.
That's the richest.
We are, but people don't like, because if you fail on something, then investors are going to say, it doesn't work, I'm not going to invest in this. No, it doesn't mean that it doesn't work. It didn't work in that particular setting. So there's a lot of educational aspect to do. And I had conversation with CEOs of other companies that said, I don't want to share my data, and I don't care. because if it's good for me, if it's difficult for you, it's your problem. So there's really a mindset that needs to change.
This is why I think it needs to be bigger than companies, right? It needs to be
Exactly.
a
It
government
has to be
mandate, a big institutional, like macro view that
Completely.
that mandates
Very
this.
high level.
But you will, sorry, I just want to, but you will face the risk of having people being skeptical that there is someone that's going to control it. I mean, don't forget.
There's always those
The
people.
big brother story is always around us. And and we live in a country, particularly here in the US, where if you put someone that's going to oversee, they're not going to like it. And this will require also some form of regulation. The tech industry thrived
public-private,
because there was less and less regulation.
partnerships.
I think what's clear, there is benefit to this. I think we can all agree on that. I think the obviously missing thing at the moment, there is no vessel to do this. Even if we've got that vessel, I don't think that necessarily guarantees it works. I think that there is a problem. I mean, it's a studied problem. It's game theory, right? Is it better for us to collectively collaborate, but then when one person goes rogue, there is an individual win for them? That means that one win is, whilst the tide may lift all boats, there is someone always with an eye that actually I can do better than the other boats if I cheat on this system, and that has been studied, and it's where I think the telecoms industry is a really interesting example. There was a very clear commercial imperative. They figured out, they knew it was not going to be successful unless they worked together. There was no win for anybody there, and I think that's the challenge to our industry, is actually companies can build decent businesses without collaborating. I think we can build better businesses with collaboration. I think we can do much better for patients with collaboration, and that's where I think we need to do ability to make sure that people can realize that commercial benefit. And so we end up with this chicken and egg problem. I think as soon as people start to see success, of course the wheel starts spinning and people start to do more and more of it.
More.
But it's how do you get that first win? And I think it does fall, someone's got to take the initiative, someone's got to build the vessel. I think it has to be small steps at a time, which is one of the problems with data, is by definition we need lots of it. But I think we need to be really targeted, go to one particular area. I think someone like the FDA taking the lead makes absolute sense. But let's not try and take everything. Let's go for one piece where we think we can realize a win in a couple of years, because then the whole thing opens up.
Think about it.
I want to cut in, and because we've got 3 minutes left, and we've danced around the subject, but I want to talk about artificial intelligence, because I think there's everybody, I think, maybe with some exceptions, believe that it's going to be a huge impact in the future. But there's also a lot of smoke and mirrors now. I think, and it's partly our fault, because pharma companies are saying, oh, we have to have an AI strategy. Investors are telling you, I'm not going to invest in you unless you have an AI strategy. And so people are just inventing stuff that doesn't mean anything. Where do we think AI in the next 36 months, where is AI going to have its biggest impact for us in advanced therapies, do you think, if at all?
So, in terms of AI, I think we've got to think back to computing and remember some of the nonsense that was spoken there in the early days. I mean, it's a misquote, I know, but this idea that originally we're going to see 5 computers in the world, potentially maximum, that wasn't a quote that was said, but it took Bill Gates to say, actually, a computer in every home, and completely transform that. So I think the short answer is, we of course do not know. For me, at a practical level, actually, and it's not necessarily the biggest impact, but it's one I can see most, is in the field. Let's not forget the physical piece. I think we talk a lot about the virtual world, and its impact is going to be huge, but also for us now, we can already see how it's completely transformed how we use robotics today. They're much more capable, much more powerful, and back to kind of my earlier comments, the external industries are seeing this huge investment to make AI make robotics more capable through the application of AI. So I think in the physical world, there's an enormous amount to gain. I think we just mustn't lose sight of that.
Claudia, you've got a team looking at this. I mean, what's your take?
I think that patient data, post-infusion patient data, will create value for the pharma, value for the industry, value for the regulators, and value for the investors, understanding eventually that can be reimbursed because the data tells you, when you accumulate all the data of all those treatments around the world and create an algorithm where you can collect data constantly from those patients, able to see the outcome.
But doesn't that require tying the efficacy to the manufacturing, to the starting material, or is it just the efficacy data?
No, you can create. That's what I said at the beginning. You have different pockets where AI can play a big role because data is there. The data is there. Post-patient infusion is one, and in the manufacturing, creating that data constantly that you receive from the manufacturing also will create efficiency. So you need to understand that there are pockets where the AI will play a big role.
Raphael, you've faced with this conundrum yourself
Yeah.
as a therapeutic developer.
So discovery for sure. It's already there. We're already using it.
Yeah.
But I'm kind of past that. I think the future is going to remain still in analytics, improving the analytics. I want to use more AI in developing digital biomarkers, and that goes to my synthetic view of the things. I want to believe that we can pull off synthetic clinical trials that, again, are never going to replace the real clinical trials, but they're going to help de-risking some key questions and finding some answers early on to fine-tune and guide us better on designing the proper trial to give the right answer to successfully get an approval down the road. That's what, and do it a little faster. That's where I see it short-term. Long-term, there's probably more to seek for.
So we've heard some impact maybe on the analysis of efficacy data, the predictability of clinical trials. We often hear people talk about its impact on discovery. Being able to mimic genetic engineering constructs, for instance, or discover targets better, faster, cheaper. And then we've also heard about manufacturing optimization. When is the optimum time for transfection? How can we reduce, what are some mechanisms we can reduce media consumption, shorten expansion time, maintain T cell, memory, minimize T cell exhaustion. Is that all quite futurescaping? Are there any thoughts in those sort of avenues?
Actually, in the manufacturing setting, you can collect more data than what you're collecting today. And if you collect all the data that you can in those biomarkers of those cells that are in that bioreactor, you can predict more accurately, like Raphael said.
So let me ask you, because I've talked to people who are scared to collect more data than they need because they don't want to know.
That was actually it's interesting because pharma does that too sometimes. They don't want to collect too much data, but in the discovery phase maybe it's important.
And I think that's where it's different through development. In manufacturing, people become really sensitive that something surfaces that actually tells them something that
that's true.
Puts them outside. There's more validation they need to do. There's more confidence they need to do. But I think early on.
I said early on. Then you define which ones. But
people are hungry for data. People love data, and then I think the models we can build around that. There's an enormous amount we can do.
You don't want to bring a problem that you don't have yet. but
and yet sometimes you don't know where the problem or the opportunity lies until you collect the data, and then you can look at it and analyze it.
And I think that's what actually to take your question of. We've got all of this multitude of areas that exist. I think really the power of AI is the fact that no longer do we have to look in silos. We can actually look data across a whole load of different parts of the manufacturing part, different parts of the discovery process, how that interacts with the patients. That's what I think AI does really well, is unpicks the things we previously couldn't see.
Work with different dimensions. From the patient side, from the manufacturing side, you have completely a network that if they can relate, and that's where AI may come, outcome will
I'd love to give you some last comments on some things we haven't touched, or about this subject, and then the ancillary is what would you like us to talk about in a future think tank? So we'll just go across the panel. Let's start with you, Raphael.
I think. In the world of cell therapy or advanced therapies, I think there are always big questions around how can we develop those drugs in a way that we can bring more effective and accessible treatments to more patients. It has to be more about how many patients we can bring under our treatments. Today, we treat a very, very little amount of patients with our things, and it's not satisfactory. We have to do better. I think we can, and I think it's not one way. There are multiple avenues to do this. And by the way, by sharing our different experience, we will find the different options that can lead to a more accessible set of treatments that can literally save lives of patients. And so I'm a believer in this, but there's going to be a lot of hurdles, and we're going to need to debate and exchange a lot about it. So that's a topic that I'm really excited about that we could bring in the future.
Perfect. Thank you.
Yeah, I think for me, In cell and gene, it is different to every pharmaceutical that has been developed in the past. It's got different delivery modalities, it puts additional pressures on clinicians, it puts additional pressures on supply chain. That's before we've even got into the manufacturing piece, which is the one I think we talk most widely about, and then back to kind of some of the things we've discussed around the discovery and the development of these therapies and how that's different, and actually availability of patients in that side makes it a very different field. And I think for me, that's where actually I do think we've got a great opportunity to learn, and back to what we were talking about at the start, what's happening in Silicon Valley, how do tech companies play things, what does that mean that we can harness as an industry, given the fact this is not classic pharma as usual. And that's even suggesting that pharma as usual even had it right back in the day, to some of the points you were saying, Raphael, about the fact you've got 3 companies to build. There are things I think we can look to learn from those industries. I think actually moving forward in terms of topics that I think are really important for us in industry to talk about, we spoke about kind of how we bring data together. I think it's much bigger than that. I think we really think about as an industry how we're working together across all of these problems. Where are the competitive spaces? Where are the non-competitive spaces? And I think, again, back to my comment on early wins, I think wherever we can look for that, hopefully where we're winning together, we actually make it easier in perhaps some of those harder spaces, and maybe data's actually not where we start. That might be the really tricky one because of IP and because of sensitivities. We can show we can work really well together over here. Perhaps it starts to build those relationships that mean in a few years, actually it becomes easier to do some of those other things. So yeah, I think we should be thinking really widely as an industry about where are the opportunities to come together.
Last word to you, Claudia.
I would like to see the hospital integration, the physicians being sitting here and talking about cell and gene therapy. How can we deploy that to our patients, and as an industry do that delivery, bring them to the table and sit down and talk.
I'm going to ask you one last question. It's specific to you because you've been, I think, a representative of cell and gene therapies, advanced therapies, at some of the highest levels in the U.S. administration, at least. Do you think there is an opportunity to shape government policy, government programs, ARPA, DOD, the White House, other organizations that you work with, to help bring a macro view or macro infrastructure or macro programs to this that can rise the tide of and pace of breakthroughs?
I think that it's something that is being discussed heavily in the National Academy of Sciences many times, with many agencies all together sitting down and talking about, even the FDA at the table, talking about how can we do this sharing of the data to bring these therapies to the next level and bring access. It's a conversation that has been ongoing for a while and needs some action. So I think that either ARM, either the standard coordinating body, either other organizations, there are nonprofit, governmental, and federal subsidized. I think that they should start to think about where they can play a bigger role, because that's where we need right now.
Well, we look forward to you leading that charge. I want to really thank you all for joining me in this conversation in the inaugural think tank, and for scheduling it and for the provocative thoughts and comments. We're super happy to have brought this to you live. Again, I'm Lee Buckler. I'm co-founder of one of the co-founders of the Advanced Therapies think tank. I would be remiss if I didn't thank IB Communications, part of IB TV team, and of course our inaugural sponsor, BCA Advanced Therapies, part of Blood Centers of America, for contributing some sponsorship to supporting this program and supporting the conversations that we hope to bring to you in the weeks and months ahead. And we're going to pause now on the live broadcast, bring together my co-hosts and team to talk to you a little bit about what we're planning for the think tank in the weeks and months ahead, and we look forward to engaging with each of you on all the social media platforms and talking to you in the future. Thank you all.
Thank you. Thank you for having us.
All right, welcome back. Again, Lee Buckler, one of the co-founders of Advanced Therapies think tank. We are here on the floor of Facilitate Advanced Therapies Week 2025 in Dallas, Texas. An exciting conference, obviously one of the more exciting conferences of the year in terms of the trade show and the content and the opportunity to mingle with clinicians, manufacturers, and discoverers alike, investors. We wanted to bring you a little bit more information about what we're planning for the Advanced Therapies Think Tank, or AT3 as we like to call it. We just had a great panel discussion, and now I brought on my co-hosts Audrey and Sven to talk a little bit more about the think tank. But of course, first of all, we need to know about you. So Audrey, tell us a little bit about Audrey Greenberg.
Yes, thanks, Lee. Audrey Greenberg, co-founder and CEO of AG Capital Advisors. We're a strategic consulting and advisory firm specializing in private equity and investments. We really help to optimize not only asset selection, but post-acquisition scale up and build out, and then optimization of valuation on the back end. So it's been fun to be part of that, coming on the heels of selling Center for Breakthrough Medicines, a cell and gene therapy CDMO that was sold in October 2023 that I started in 2019, and love being part of this group. It's so fun to talk with Sven and Lee, of course, you, about all the trends in advanced therapies and the wonderful players that are participating in this space.
Awesome. And Sven?
Yeah, thanks, Lee. It's wonderful to be with you two beautiful people. So I'm Sven Keeley. I am a partner with Sisei Ventures. We are a boutique ventures organization focused on cell and gene therapies, and we focus only on therapeutics. We have a very strong focus on Japan, looking to build the Japanese ecosystem, but we will invest internationally also. One of the real separators about us is that we get very involved with the companies. So those people that know me know I've been on the other side as an operator for 20 plus years, and I've got a fair amount of experience everywhere from building companies, raising money, non-clinical, clinical, and commercializing products. So we feel very strongly about all the companies that we invest in. We need to work very closely with them, support them, and help them to grow. One of the things that separates us about Japan is we look very much to keep the Japanese companies in Japan and bring in Western expertise. And that way we can help grow the ecosystem in Japan. And we think that's really, really important, because the science that's coming out of there is absolutely sterling. And we need to be able to build that so we can build a better global cell and gene therapy ecosystem, and that will help patients everywhere around the world. So that's a little bit about me. Really excited to be here with Lee and with Audrey, and to get engaged with all of you and find out more about what all of you are doing as part of the Advanced Therapies Think Tank.
So just to give you a little bit of a history of the think tank and why we came up with the idea in the first place, it was after one too many whiskeys that Sven and I had at meeting on the Mesa, where we realized that where we learned the most in these conferences wasn't from the canned presentations, and when we're at home, it's not from the podcasts and webinars, as much as they add a lot of value to the dissemination of information and education. It's in the conversations.
Yeah.
It's in the conversations where people sit on the couch and have a little bit more relaxed conversation, and they start to share their personal views, their personal pain points, their personal journey in this sector. And that's where you really start to identify and you really start, the light bulbs start to go off in terms of where we think there's opportunities and challenges that we might be able to address. And we know that not everybody has the opportunity to go to conferences. Not everybody has the opportunity to go to every conference. That's certainly true. And so we wanted to bring an online discussion that's shares opinions, is provocative, tries to push the envelope on the conversation, isn't just the canned presentation, and try to identify ways that we could engage the community, engage the conversation, and raise the level of the conversation in a way that was interactive and hopefully a little bit fun, and certainly I think a lot of provocative. So in the weeks ahead, we are building a faculty. We will have a fixed faculty for the course of the year, where we will pick from, along with occasional subject matter experts, where we will bring in on discrete subjects in a couch-like format, just like this, in an online format. And we will, it'll be live, it'll also be recorded to some extent, and we're looking for you to subscribe, certainly. We're looking for you to join the community. We're also looking for you to submit, and you'll see calls for this across all of our platforms in the coming weeks, for you to submit your topics. What are some of the provocative topics that you think we're sticking our head in the sand on, that you think we're all ignoring, that you think we're not having the proper conversation around? So I'm going to put the two of you on the spot and say, what are some of the topics that you'd like to see us address in the weeks ahead that meet those checkboxes that we've all decided are important for this to be, interesting enough for people to tune in?
Yeah, I'm a huge supporter of, I guess I would call it the underdog, but maybe that's not appropriate. But certainly the patient perspective would be great. There's a ton of patients out there, advocates, family advocates on behalf of various therapeutics and modalities and disease indications, where you don't often get to hear from them, and hearing the experience that they're going through, or possibly even those that have been cured. And ultimately, that's what we're all here for, is to increase the affordability and accessibility of cell and gene therapies. And another thing that we could be talking about is a curated mix of tools and technologies. Like, you walk around this conference floor, for those of you that aren't here, and there are a lot of competitors in the same space. How do we get some consolidation and some efficiency that allows those that are winners go to the top and partner with other winners and create a really interesting offering that just makes things better, really?
Yeah, I absolutely agree. And excuse me, I'm losing my voice, which is probably an indication of how good this meeting's been. It's been non-stop. So I absolutely agree with Audrey on the patients and the patient aspect. At the end of the day, that's why we all do these jobs. And it doesn't matter if we're in investment, we're in tools and technology, CDMOs, therapeutic developers, payers, whatever. This is all about the patient. And so, couldn't agree more with Audrey, is being able to see what the benefit is of all of the hard work that we put in, because nobody here works an 8-hour day 5 days a week. Everyone works above and beyond, and it's really great to see the effect of all of that. So in addition to that, I'd like to see the cell and gene therapy environment is changing, and as from an investor perspective, I want to see how that's affecting lots of different companies. So obviously the tools and technology company, but the therapeutics companies that we are very much involved with. It really would be interesting to see what are the things that people are worried about, what are the things that people are doing. There are companies out there that are failing every day, but there are companies out there that are continuing and that are doing really well. What is it that they're doing? What are the lessons that everyone else can learn from these companies that are surviving, and even more from those that are thriving? So for me, to understand that would be really, really good. I also want to understand some of the new science that's coming out. We're seeing incredible discoveries literally on a weekly basis, new ways of editing, new ways of storing cells, new ways of delivering cells. And I want to hear about some of those. How are people thinking about applying those? And maybe we can use this as a forum for people to connect to each other and say, hey, I've got a great way of delivering cells. Someone else can say, hey, I'm looking for a great way to deliver cells. And we can think about how we can allow people to connect. So for me, that's really important. And then to understand the story behind the story. So we don't want the PR component of the big companies here. We don't need that PR story. We can read that in the press releases. We want the story behind the story. We want to speak to the people who have been involved in the activities and really understand from their perspective, how does it affect them? How does it affect their family? And how does it affect their company?
Picking up on that, one of the things I worry about in this industry is we all get together. We're all passionate about these therapies. We all think this is the best thing ever, and we sit around and we drink our own Kool-Aid, and we ignore that a lot of other companies are trying to find better, cheaper, faster ways of accomplishing the same therapeutic efficacy without all this ex vivo cell therapy manipulation.
No question.
And I think sometimes we ignore the competitive threats of other modalities, right? And we're not thinking enough about what's so special about cell therapy or gene therapy that can't be accomplished by other modalities, and focus our energies on that. And should we be paying more attention and bringing more people in? Because the pharma's doing it all the time. They'll take cell therapy as long as long as it's the best thing, but as soon as there's something better or there's higher margin, they'll drop it like a hot potato.
Yeah,
right?
Absolutely. I think this is critically important, and this is something we discussed at the investor session on Monday. I think, we in cell and gene therapy have long thought we are special because we can take cells, we can manipulate cells, we can put new genes in, and we have been able to cure patients who have had incurable diseases, and we have saved lives, and this is phenomenal. But as we're moving into more common indications, we need to realize we're not the only players in this jungle. There are lots of other players out there, big pharmas out there. There are small molecules, large molecules, ADCs, new technologies coming out every day. And we need to lift our heads out of our own Lucozade or our own Kool-Aid bowl and look around. Exactly to your point, we need to understand what is the competition out there and what is the value that we add, so that when we go out there, we can talk not only, hey, we can cure this disease, but why is that a better thing? Why is that more cost effective? Why does that change the patient's life? And that becomes a really important discussion. And only once we can do that can we start really interacting and competing with the big players, and we'll be taken seriously.
One of my concerns about the patient perspective, Audrey, is that I've been using on some of my slides carefully, and a little bit tentatively, hashtag luxury medicine. At some point, CGTs are going to be stigmatized as luxury medicines for people of a certain ethnography in certain social demographic circles. And that's a stigma none of us get up in the morning to perpetuate or to foster. We need to find ways throughout the entire ecosystem to make sure not only the patients get it, because we all know there's a bunch of eligible patients, but there's a lot of eligible patients who aren't even being told or prescribed a sickle cell therapy or a CGT because their local physician and medical community aren't able to, don't know about it, are skeptical of it, all of the barriers that for whatever reason that exists, right?
Yeah, exactly. There's a lot of issues that need to be addressed in our space. The payer is a huge component of it. What are insurance companies willing to pay for these therapeutics? And then countries outside of the United States, how that integrates into their social system. I would say second, it's certainly physician education, adoption. And third, for those that need to travel, like the perspective of how do you spend 2 months away with your whole family, and those that need to care for the patient, especially if they're a child. But I would also say, like, a lot of the technologies, you walk around the conference and everyone's touting, oh, it's a 10% reduction in cost or 20%. It's like, no, people, we need 199% reduction in cost, and the human error component, and the paper batch records, and the way, you just did the session, Lee, on AI, and I know you talked about this, but having the data to be able to actually utilize AI, how do you get there when nearly all the manufacturers are paper? And so there's a huge amount of effort that's going to go into digitizing our space, to making it more efficient, to reducing costs, and keeping your eye on the horizon of it might not be an autologous vein-to-vein treatment that's going to cure some of these cancers and diseases. It may be, in vivo or some of these other there's a way to deliver higher payload. So there's a lot of interesting new technologies out there. The next 5 to 10 years are going to be fascinating, and I'm just happy that we have a platform to talk about it.
It's super exciting. I think, and to that point, I think one of the things we want to do is make sure that we're not sitting around talking amongst ourselves. I think it's imperative that we bring patients in, we bring patient advocates, we bring healthcare executives, we bring reimbursers, the insurers, right? Very few of them here. We bring pharmacists. We bring a whole ecosystem of people who aren't immersed in this every day, and try and get their perspectives on the therapies that we're so passionate about, but are very new to them, and understanding how they see it and how we can embed them and integrate them and engage them on what we think is our lifelong mission, right?
I think this is going to be really important, and touching a little bit on what Audrey had said, it's that education component. We need to be able to educate all of the players in the ecosystem. And we are here at these great meetings, and we know a lot about it, and we are very educated. But to your point, and to Audrey's point, the patients don't always get the right education. The payers don't always get the right education. The pharmacists don't. And the people that aren't immersed in this aren't necessarily being educated about the benefits and the risks and the weaknesses. And we need to be really pragmatic that these are therapies like any other. They do have downsides. Some of them are related to cost. Others are related to all sorts of other things. Nothing is perfect. But unless we educate people as to what are the pros and the cons, how to use them correctly, and find out from them, so learn from them, where do they fit into their therapies, their ways of treating, their ways of applying and delivering the therapies, we are never going to ingratiate ourselves into the wider therapeutic space, which is really what we need to do in order to be able to grow and become an accepted member of the worldwide therapies making patients' lives better in ecosystem.
Last word to you, Audrey.
Yeah, I think, look, it's an interesting time in our industry. We came off of a really manic time in 2020, 2021. We saw the stock market peak in our sector. It continued on a downward trajectory. JP Morgan last week, everyone was talking about, what's going to happen? What does this year look like? Stay alive in 2025. I mean, I'm happy to be keeping an eye on the market and on the financing trends. We have this global macroeconomic environment that we're dealing with, coupled with sort of too many companies being formed. And so there has to be a bid-ask realization in terms of valuation to really see the market opening up. So I'm excited to see that happen and talk about it. And then see what companies are able to successfully bring these therapies to market and have commercial success. And I think having some of those barometers and those KPIs to investors to hang their hat on is really going to be what makes a difference for all of us. And I'm pleased to be sitting here with you guys talking about it.
I'm really happy to be launching this with Audrey and Sven, and each of us will lead different conversations at different times, bring our different perspectives to the conversation. I think that we want three things from you as an audience. You're already here, so hopefully you have joined us on LinkedIn, Advanced Therapies Think Tank, AT3. Hopefully you've been to our website, at3.chat or advancedtherapiesthinktank.com, and subscribed. So join our community there, so you can also get notified by email of things. And then the third thing we want from you, which you'll see very soon, is an engagement, a solicitation, if you will, on topics that you think would be provocative, important, challenging topics that we should wrestle to the ground here in a think tank session in the calendar year near you. What you can expect from us is some announcements in the weeks ahead of the calendar year, the topics, the dates that have been selected, some engagement, like you say, and then any of your ideas. We welcome your ideas either on social media, through the website, a form, or just contacting any one of us. And we look forward to bringing content, conversations, ideas. Hopefully we can provoke some great conversations amongst you as well, at home and in your own communities, amongst your own stakeholders, and we can have a lot of fun doing it. So thank you both for joining me and in this initiative for today and in this initiative over the year. We really look forward to working with you all.
Looking forward to it. Let's survive in 25 and prosper in 26.
Thrive in 25.
Awesome. Cheers.